I'm Alan Spears with Occupy Democrats, and in some truly incredible breaking news, we have just learned from the Washington Post that Donald Trump and his campaign may very well have once again broken federal law by their stunt at Arlington Cemetery. And if everything that the Washington Post reported is true and does come to pass, Trump could be enduring another series of courtroom battles akin to his hush money scandal. Now, as many of you are very well aware at this point, Donald Trump is not doing very well in the polls nationally and is in fact trailing Kamala Harris and Tim Walz by a good margin. We've certainly seen Trump seeming to get a little bit more irrational as he rants and raves online, and his campaign seems to be thrashing and desperately grasping at straws to try to levy any level of criticism against Harris and Walz, but it just does not seem to be sticking. So in a desperate bid to try to regain some support and kind of lean into that patriotic nature that so many Americans really resonate with, Trump and his team decided to visit Arlington Cemetery. Now, this does bring us into our breaking story today. As many of you are well aware at this point, Trump and his team, they got into a bit of an altercation with the staff at Arlington Cemetery, and it didn't go quite as well as I think Trump had hoped it would. But as the Washington Post have just dropped this bombshell of a story, it could go beyond just a mere physical altercation, as Trump might once again find himself inside of the courtroom, and I just find that absolutely delightful. In a detailed analysis written by Aaron Blake of the Washington Post, he writes, "If they were told that filming in this hallowed area wasn't allowed, as a U.S. defense official tells the Washington Post they were more than once, and bulldozed ahead, that would be at least something of a scandal. Trump's campaign has suggested there was a dispute, but has said, quote, there was no physical altercation as described. Even aside from the nature of the clash, which NPR reported got physical, we're left with a very important question. Was shooting those photos and that video illegal in and of itself? Arlington National Cemetery's statement certainly suggested it was. In their statement, they write, quote, federal law prohibits political campaign or election-related activities within Army National Military Cemeteries. This would, of course, include Arlington, to include photographers, content creators, or any other persons attending for purposes or in direct support of a partisan political candidate's campaign. Arlington National Cemetery reinforced and widely shared this law and its prohibitions with all participants. Now, the law says the executive director of the Army National Military Cemetery shall, quote, ensure the sanctity of public and private memorial and ceremonial events. All memorial services and ceremonies within Army National Military Cemeteries, other than official ceremonies, shall be purely memorial in its purpose. It also adds, memorial services and ceremonies at Army National Military Cemeteries will not include partisan political activities. So naturally, this does beg the question, were Trump and his campaign's actions a partisan political activity? Well, it would seem that Aaron Blake has an answer for us as he writes, Trump has no official role in the U.S. government right now, and the political purpose of the visit would seem pretty evident. In addition to Trump visiting the cemetery with campaign aides, his team has in recent days sought to highlight the Biden administration's chaotic 2021 withdrawal from Afghanistan and attach it to Vice President Kamala Harris. The Trump team has also shared the images in a very campaign-oriented way. Top campaign aide Dan Scavino posted a video of Trump laying a wreath with family members. Some family members spoke at last month's Republican National Convention. Surprise. And Trump's TikTok post featured clips of his visit and Trump saying, quote, and then they took over that disaster, the leaving of Afghanistan. The caption appended, should have never happened. In other words, writes Blake, this goes beyond merely memorializing the dead. Trump is making an argument about the relative merits of himself and his successors in leading the federal government, one of whom he's running against. This, of course, is Kamala Harris. Mickey McCallia, a University of Connecticut history professor who wrote a book on Arlington National Cemetery, said politics are inherent at the cemetery, which often has to navigate that. Quote, there is a long tradition of military families and veterans making their grief public to call leaders to account for their policies, actions, and words, and these protests have come from all along the political spectrum. But McCallia called it, quote, undeniable that the Trump visit was a campaign event. Tanya Marsh, an expert on funeral and cemetery law at Wake Forest University, added the U.S. law gives cemeteries broad authority to establish rules, including for visitors. Marsh stated, quote, "Barring a private photographer who appears to be acting on behalf of a political campaign is certainly something that appears to be within the cemetery's authority. So yes, if the campaign was filming during the wreath-laying ceremony for partisan political activities, that would be a violation of federal law." Michaelia weighs in on this again, stating, quote, "While the family's statement that they invited and approved of the campaign photographer's presence in Section 60 may soften the remarkable cynicism and crass behavior of the Trump campaign in the eyes of some people being MAGA, the law does not give them the authority to sanction campaign photography." So all of that is to say that once again, Trump and his team are finding themselves on the wrong side of the law. This really isn't a surprise anymore. Now, as of this recording, we do not have any details as to the full nature of the report or any of the consequences that may stem from this, but suffice it to say, they will likely be quite big, and we will, of course, keep you updated right here on Occupy Democrats.